The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
When you read your speeches, the conclusion one draws.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
The dogma lives loudly within you. That's of concern.
Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. And they're taking away fundamental rights. You have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
The Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
You know, if people are against you because of your faith, I think you're doing something right. I was thinking about that. I read an article by a guy named Austin Ruse, and we'll try to link over to it, called The Black Legend of Christian Brutes. There is this growing perception amongst the political, the academic elites of our culture. The view today is that Christians, you are a bigot because of what you believe. There was a scholarly paper published in the journal Political Behavior, and it was entitled this: Christian Nationalism and Political Violence, Victimhood, Racial Identity, Conspiracy, and Support for Capital Attacks. Support for capital attacks. And the author argues that there is this correlation between this thing called Christian nationalism and political violence from the right. And they say that these Christian nationalists, whatever they are, right? They're racist. They are anti-immigration. They're anti-Islamic. They don't like so-called same-sex marriage. They don't like how the government responded to COVID. They believe certain theories like the 2020 election was rigged, or they defend the Second Amendment, or they brandish Bibles during the insurrection or the Capitol riot of January 6th in 2021. And that one event, by the way, is the only example of violence by the right that they could even cite, right? The only one. But these are the people who are supposed to be inciting all the violence in our country. Now, I don't know about you, but the last time that I checked, most of the violence happening in our country, it was happening in cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, right? Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Nashville, Seattle. I mean, the list goes on. All these cities that are run by Democrats, not by Republicans. And look, this is not a partisan speech here. It's not. It's just a fact. You take a look at these particular cities. What's the political ideology that drives them? Who's running them? Is it Christians? Is it conservatives? Or is it these leftist liberal elites? And look, that's not even the worst example I shared with you. The highbrow magazine, The Atlantic, right? It published a piece last year that said that the AR-15, it's become a sacred object for Christian nationalists. And you know what the author did too? And here's the killer. Threw the rosary in. They threw the rosary in there. And let me share one quick quote. It says, quote, "The rosary has been woven into the conspiratorial politics and absolutist gun culture." That's the quote out of it. The rosary has been woven into a conspiratorial politics and absolutist gun culture. The author says the rosary can be a weapon in the fight against evil and turn into something dangerously evil. So again, I go back. I think this is spiritual. Satan hates the rosary. It's the weapon that will bind him, right? I often say it is the blue army that defeated the red army, the army of Our Lady and the Rosary that helped bring down communism and the Iron Curtain, right? For 70 years, that blue army prayed. What did they pray? The rosary, right? So, of course, Satan's going to twist something. He's going to make a good seem wrong and evil. That's what he's doing here. Tell Father Rocky about that. Father Rocky wants to get 1 million people praying the rosary. So the author came across a Catholic website called Roman Catholic Gear. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It sells something they call a combat rosary. It's kind of cool. I think the rosary is pretty cool. I understand that, look, it's spiritual combat, but the author thinks that they're talking about physical combat, and they should really do their due diligence. I've invited Austin Ruse to stop by. He's the president of the Center for Family and Human Rights. He's been watching this trend for a while, and I'm delighted that he is, and I'm delighted he wrote about it. You can check out his article. It's called The Black Legend of Christian Brutes, and you can find him, by the way, c-fam.org. Austin, thanks for being here. Thanks for your writing, and I really appreciate this perspective. Why did you call it The Black Legend? And maybe give us the history and Lay out the case that you make. I think it's a good one.
Well, the idea of the black legend is kind of old, that has mostly been attached to the Spanish. And I end the article with a mention of an engraving from 1598 called the Black Legend that shows a Spaniard feeding Indian children to his dog. And so there's this black legend that has grown up around the Spanish that continues to this day. And not just through the exploration of the New World, but down to this very day, you know, Franco and all that. So in quite the same way, they are demonizing Christians and, you know, saying that the real danger in this country, now they will dress it up and they'll say white Christian nationalists and stuff like that. But when you talk about the definition of what they mean by this, it's Christian conservatives.
Yep.
You know, if you're suspicious of, you know, unrestricted immigration and you're in favor of the Second Amendment and you think maybe the last election could have been rigged a little bit, all of a sudden you are a Christian nationalist. And the big threat to America is violence from, and they dress it up in various ways besides, you know, Christian nationalists, you know, MAGA extremists and all that. But what they're talking about is the run-of-the-mill Christians who believe certain political ideas along with Jesus Christ and his church.
Yeah, I often felt that you bring up a great point regarding MAGA or MAGA. They often, I hear Joe Biden love to say these MAGA conservatives, right? These MAGA conservatives. Or MAGA's extremist is probably how he paints it. I mean, it's really a broad brush for all conservatives and all Republicans. It's just
That's right.
It's a little shield for him to
That's
be
right.
able to say, hey, these guys are bad, we're good, you know, and oh no, I'm just talking about this group. But Christian nationalism, the MAGA extremists, these type of labels are out there, and I guess they take root how? By repetition, by repeating them over and over again. How they become part of the lexicon?
You know, I have never, in my memory, in my life, and I think in my reading of history, never heard an American president speak that way about his political opponents, and basically about half of the country that did not support him in the election.
Yeah.
It's really frightening. And this week at CFAM, we're going to be reporting about the Biden administration at the Third Committee in the General Assembly this week, who are calling for reprisals against people like us, because we may disagree with them on COVID, or we may disagree with them on quote, women's rights. So they're calling for reprisals. And this was an official statement of the Biden administration at the UN General Assembly.
Wow.
And we've got, you know, Hillary Clinton saying that, you know, we need to be deprogrammed.
Yep.
There's a lot of kind of frightening language that's going on around us today. And you see the same kind of language spoken by Hamas when they talk about the Jewish people. So we're in I think a very dangerous position. And that's why I wrote this article, because it's been on my mind for a really long time, the way that they have been demonizing us.
And also, when you've got publications like The Atlantic writing about this, right? When you've got things as beautiful as the Rosary being demonized and associated with terrorism, that's, in my opinion, a real distortion.
Well, you know, the idea that we as Christians are dangerous doesn't get any more mainstream than an article in the Atlantic Monthly. You know, it's one of the, you know, Bibles of the secular left. And so when they write an article about how the Rosary is dangerous, I also tracked down the assertion that a documentary about manhood produced by the Knights of Columbus is also dangerous. And it's funny because in the men's group in one of the local churches here in Northern Virginia, we're watching that documentary. Yeah. And it encourages, you know, men to reclaim their manhood. So it is incredibly mainstream to go after what just a few years ago were just sort of regular, typical things. And you know what got me going on this was I've been reading deeply over the last several months on the First World War.
Right.
And it was remarkable, the propaganda that was being pumped out on all sides. So this kind of black legend of the other side is extremely dangerous to those who receive it and those who are the target of it.
What role does the media play in all this in shaping perceptions about Christianity and its adherents? I mean, where's this coming from? Is it media? Is it educational institutions? I mean, how does this get into the bloodstream of America?
Well, it's coming from, a lot of different sources. I mean, it's even coming from the FBI, who says that the number one source of terrorism in the United States are Christian conservatives.
That's crazy.
And this is why they wanted to infiltrate traditionalist parishes. So, that's one source of it. The media is one source of it. The hardcore left is another source of it. Yeah, it's coming from all over the place. It's funny with regard to the rosary. I don't know if this is the case where you live, but where I live, it is a comfort to look over in the next car and see the rosary dangling from the rearview mirror. Is that happening where you live?
Yeah, I see it. Yep.
It's a beautiful thing, and you go, oh, there's a good person. It's an amazing thing that the secular left would try to make people think that this is a scary thing. It's a scary thing to the devil. There's no question about that. Yep. But not to anybody else. It's a beautiful thing.
Amen. It's funny. It's not just the rosary either, though. I mean, the mindset. I was shocked. I went back east to visit family. Was at the beach, for about a week with some friends and some family, and somebody that was there. I had a T-shirt that I bought. Right, it had an American flag on it, and it didn't fit me. I ordered it online. It was too small, and I thought, anybody want this? And one of the guys that was there said, I would never wear that, and I'm thinking, why not? I would never wear that American flag. He associated the American flag with conservatism, right? With Republicans, and he's a diehard liberal Democrat, right? And I'm thinking, how do we get to this point in America where the symbol of freedom and liberty, it has now been associated and twisted to the point where somebody wouldn't even wear the American flag?
Yeah. Well, some years ago, when Spain was in the World Cup for that game that they call soccer, I'm not really a fan, but it was like the first time they'd been in the World Cup, I think, in decades. And that was the first time since the Spanish Civil War that people openly waved the Spanish flag with gusto. So the flags can become associated with evil. Yep. How did the left associate our flag with evil? Well, it's because the way that they've been educated. These crazy books that they have in high school and college. And what you hear constantly from young people is that, America was founded on evil, and they exploited and murdered, millions of Native Americans. This is where that comes from. And they're ashamed and even afraid of the flags. And, I don't want to say I understand this, but I see that too, because when you see somebody flying the American flag, in your neighborhood, they're probably a patriot. Well, they're clearly a patriot, and they're probably a conservative. So in a way, we've bought into this too.
Yeah. So final thought here. I mean, how should the Christian community respond to these negative portrayals, especially instances of where extremism may be involved?
I think that people should be fearless in letting people know that they're Christians, that they're believing Christians, that they're believing Catholics. And they ought to be saying, I was at a coffee shop with my daughter yesterday, and there was a family sitting next to us, and they blessed themselves with the sign of the cross before they began. Yeah. It's a revolutionary act that people ought to utilize.
Austin, thank you. We'll check you out at cfam.org, right? And of course,
yes, cfam.org.
We'll check out your article. We posted it and linked over to it. It's well worth the read. We'll catch up again soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great to have you here.
You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to The Drew Mariani Show live each weekday at 2 to 5 Central. Thanks for listening.